All right, hello and welcome to another episode of the Revenue Revolution podcast, sponsored by Joint Flows. Today we've got the privilege of being joined by Darin Alpert. Darin is a very experienced individual, currently the VP of Strategy at RepVue, and that's one role amongst an amazing career he's had to date. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Yeah, thanks, guys. I'm doing well. Appreciate you having me on. I think I don't know about experience. I feel like experience comes every day when you're just like in the trenches learning things. So I feel like every day I'm learning something new.
Every day's a school day. That's one of my favorite sayings.
Oh,
So
I
yeah,
like that. Every day's a school day.
there you go.
Yeah,
Write that one down. Write that one down.
I like that. Have you heard success is leased, not owned, and rent is due every day?
Oh, that sounds like a good one, to be fair. Let me write that down. Say it
Uh,
again.
Yeah, success is leased, not owned, and rent is due every day.
Love that.
Yeah, I saw that. The first time I saw that was a American football player named JJ Watt. I saw it. I saw him post that, and I put that. It was the background on my phone for a long time.
Amazing.
nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. Is there anything you want to add to your introduction?
No, I mean, yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on. I get requests every once in a while to go on podcasts. I don't really feel like I've warranted to be a podcast guest. We actually host one at RepVue, but
Yeah,
um I feel like being a guest, it's a certainly a privilege. So appreciate you guys and appreciate the invite, Mick.
No,
awesome.
well, we're as you know, we're big fans here of RepVue and everything you guys are doing. So it was an honor to have you here. So let's get started.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
What's your
absolutely. I think
take?
give a bit of color and a bit of context to our listeners. Walk us through, I guess, a little bit about your career to date, how you got to where you are right now, why you're at RepVue, what's compelling you to do what you're doing there.
Yeah, for sure. I've been in sales pretty much my whole career. I mean, I even going back to like some of my first job of like making money beyond just like knick-knacky stuff in high school. But my first job, like summer between high school and college, I was selling shoes at a sporting goods store and had a blast doing that. I got to meet some, it was in a pretty nice area down in San Diego where I grew up, and I met some, I sold shoes, like the athletic shoes, to some like pretty relatively famous people. One was the head football coach of the Arizona Cardinals, this guy Dennis Green, who's a kind of a legend. So that was my first kind of experience, and there was a guy there who was just so good. What brings you in to look at shoes today? What kind of shoes are you looking for? Stuff like that, just like basic discovery questions that I kind of put as like my first sales experience. My dad's been in sales. He used to be a engineering professor at a local college in San Diego where I grew up. And then he transferred over to sell the software that he used to teach. So having him as well as like a guidepost of, and he's with his background of being an engineer, like he is very good at discovery and very good at just kind of asking questions that kind of lead to whether or not the product that he's offering solves a problem that the prospect that he's trying to sell to is looking to solve. Yeah, went on to sell. I majored in sports management, so the idea there was I wanted to become like Jerry Maguire, the sports agent in the movie with Tom Cruise. That obviously didn't work out, but sold tickets to my college basketball team in college. I would just basically get a list of alumni in the area and start cold calling them. Luckily, we were pretty good the years I was doing that, so it wasn't super hard. We had the best couple years in school history. Um, Went on to sell country club memberships right out of college. That was my first real salary job. Had a blast doing that. Met some really cool people. One of the members I signed up was Cheech from Cheech and Chong. That was a blast.
No way.
Yeah, I got to golf with him. He's a super nice guy.
Amazing.
Yeah, just very laid back. It was down in Southern California, so in Palm Springs, if you guys are familiar with that area. So
Yeah.
he kind of a second home for him, and just
Wow.
super nice guy. So did that again. So I compare selling country club memberships to software because one, it's a high ticket item. Our membership initiation fee was about 60 grand, and you're also trying to retain members and get their annual reoccurring dues because they pay them every month. And You've got to create experiences for them that make them want to stay at the club and come back and tell their friends. So it was, like I said, that experience I think was very transitional to selling software. Like I said, selling high end products and price point and getting people to renew. Did that, got into the tech thing. A friend of mine launched what's now the largest review site and platform for gluten-free people. I came on to run all of our sales and marketing. It's called Find Me Gluten Free. It's still got about 3 million people that use it every year to find gluten-free friendly restaurants all over the world, bakeries.
That Mark,
Yeah.
sorry to cut you out there. Is that the one Mark Cuban's involved in?
Yeah, he did. He initially was a customer of ours. He filled out an info request on our website. Like he hit the lead form, and I was like, this isn't real. This has to be fake. Like nah, I'm not buying this. So we responded, but at the time he owned a pizza chain that had gluten-free pizza offerings called Naked Pizza. And he wanted to advertise with us and kind of show off why people should eat there, et cetera. That led to a week later him writing a check to be our first real investor. My dad and we took on a little bit of money from, like I said, my dad and just very small amount from another person as well too. But that Mark was kind of the first big person that saw what we were doing and said, hey, yeah, I want to get involved not only as a customer, but also as an investor. So it was a really fun couple of weeks of negotiating those deals. One phone call, 5 million emails. The guy doesn't really do meetings, so it was really interesting doing all that over email. But I learned a lot about efficiency there, and it was really fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's then evolved into selling software, and that's where I am now. And was at G2 prior to RepVue, was an RVP of sales. Started out as a rep there, got promoted to run a team. Was at Bazaar Voice, was at Trust Radius as well. So I've kind of been in this ratings and review space for a while on the sales side of things, and it's been really fun.
And now you're pretty much sitting on the other side where the sales data is essentially leading to benchmarking and all of the good things you guys are doing with RepVue. What's your take on the landscape today? And there's a lot of layoffs, there's a lot of people missing quota, not reaching quota. What do you make of it?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's been reps missing quota long before the last couple of years, and the layoffs. I mean, I remember at one org I was at, it was like, hey, you need to be at 100% of quota to get to President's Club. And then 2 weeks prior to the fiscal year ending, we got a note from RevOps saying, hey, we're actually inviting everybody that's over 70% of quota to join President's Club. So it's like, are quotas even attainable? Are the numbers even accurate? Most companies, I would say they're probably not, to be honest. I feel like a lot of the numbers that are, I feel like numbers get trickled down from investors, and that hits all the way down to, account executives at the IC level. And there's a lot of padding that goes on there, but I don't think a lot of reps are set up to succeed, in my opinion. I think territories get spliced too much. I think companies start seeing success and they say, let's go hire, an army of salespeople. They can replicate what our top 2 to 3 reps and maybe our CEO are doing on the sales side of things, and we can go grow this company to 100 million in revenue. And it's not always the case. So, I feel like what's going on is, and on the layoff side, like I hate seeing it, but I also I think it was avoidable to begin with. Like I think companies overhired to start, and I think that's why a lot of this is happening.
Yeah, 100%. I've seen many companies overstaffed for a considerable period of time. It's easy to sell when things are going well. It's when things start to get difficult, that's when you really start to understand who's good and who's great and what separates them. And obviously, from your experiences, what do you think separates those AEs or those sales reps from those people who are good and can do well in a market that's thriving versus those that are able to do well and be great in a market that's not thriving?
Yeah, well, I think to that point, I mean, it's a good question. I think to that point, a rep could do really, really well at one company and be multi-year President's Club winner, and then go to another company the next year and be absolutely terrible. Or even in their org, maybe they're in mid-market rep and crushing it, and they go take an enterprise role, get a promotion internally, and they go up to the enterprise, and it's like, whoa, product market fit's not that great. My territory is not that good. I'm not the same rep I was in the mid-market. So I think there's a lot that's said about product market fit. And I think the territory that a rep gets is important. But I think there's some basic blocking and tackling things that good reps do that is just a consistency thing. And I think they're really good at discovery. I think they're really good at qualifying rep or deals out quickly so they can focus on the deals that are real. And I also think the really good reps go and talk to their peers and listen to recordings and figure out what the other best reps are doing so that they can replicate that. I think those are things that mediocre reps don't necessarily do the homework on their own. I don't think they're necessarily listening to call recordings at the same level that the really good ones are and trying to hone their craft. Maybe they're not, reading books or listening to podcasts like this, or just doing those extra little things that separates them and gets them. I think the 1% better every day thing is pretty relevant in sales. So I think it's things like that help them stand out. But there's a lot out of their control too, and I think that's the hard part.
Yeah, and you mentioned discovery a couple of times now, even when you were speaking about selling in the shoe store, the term discovery came up. And discovery today is extremely, it's always been important, but the emphasis on getting it right now and to be able to understand what's a qualified opportunity and what's not is even greater now. How do you think you can shape a good discovery in today's market?
Yeah, I think it's questions like, what happens if you don't do something about this? Like, or if it's like an inbound lead that came in, it's why did you reach out? I don't think there's a lot of reps that don't even ask that question. That's crazy to me. Like, what got you to fill out the lead form, or however you want to word that? And then as you start unpacking it, what happens if you don't do anything about this? What have you tried that hasn't worked in the past? What have you tried that has worked in the past? Okay, if you are going to bring something like this on, what other solutions have you bought as a buyer at your organization, and what needed to get done to do that? So I think there's, I'm a big fan of force management. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. They created MedPick, and that is a sales methodology. And I think they break it up really well. It's like, you've got to have command of the plan. So the plan to actually get a deal done, the plan to run your territory, the plan to outbound, the plan to upsell, cross-sell. And then there's also command of the message. So command of the message is, what's your right to win the product, or what's your right to sell the product that you're offering? Why do buyers buy you? Who are your buyers? How do you message what you're offering to those specific buyers? And I think if you can break it up into those two things and get really good at them, you can be a top rep.
Yeah.
How do you detect bad sales positions in today's market when you go for a new job in a new company and they're selling you the dream? Obviously, you've got an amazing job desk, you've got all these people who've reached target, all these people going to P Club, and then usually you join and you're month 1, week 2, and you're like, oh my God, this is not happening here. Yeah. How do you not get to that point?
Yeah, and I've been in that position, like where you're like, I've literally been like 2 days in going, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I got oversold in the hiring process. It's part of why I joined RepVue. So I didn't want that to happen to other people. But yeah, I think there's some, again, comes back to discovery. I think there's questions that you can ask that can help suss a lot of that out. Like, you think about the interview process, right? It tends to be pretty one-sided. It's the employer just kind of grilling the prospective salesperson in this instance. Tell me about your past success. Tell me about deals that you've won, deals you've lost. What's your process to getting a deal done? Here's a 3-hour take-home exercise that we want you to do so we can understand how you are as a salesperson. So I think there's a lot of that you have to do as a prospective employee at an org, especially now with hiring not being as crazy as it was even a year or two ago. And then once you've gotten past that point and they said, hey, we want to hire you, or we really like you. I think reps have the opportunity to flip the script, and I think they can schedule a half an hour call, a 1 hour call with either the hiring manager, maybe somebody in RevOps. They should be doing their own back channeling with potential reps at the company that are there now, or reps that have recently left. I think you get a lot more intel with a rep that was at a company and left in the last couple months. Why did they leave? But I think it's asking questions around, well, what exactly is my territory going to look like? Can you show me the list of accounts that I'm going to have? Why did the reps that recently left voluntarily leave? What was their reasoning? Where does pipeline come from? Is it how much outbounding versus inbounding am I going to have to do? Are you willing to show me your quota attainment dashboard on the team that I'm going to be on? Because like to your point, like a rep can go into a company where there's a lot of reps crushing it, but I would want to know if I'm joining the enterprise team, how, and like maybe it's the enterprise East team versus the West team, for example, in the US, a lot of orgs are structured that way. How is the East team performing versus the West? What's the discrepancy there? Or how does the mid-market central team compare to the mid-market West team? Because not all teams, and of course not all territories are created equally, and you've really got to dig into that.
Yeah. It's, I feel because I've been a candidate, obviously, and you feel awkward asking. You feel like you don't want to rock the boat too much, because if you ask the wrong question, then they might pull the offer out, and allegedly you're in a position where you're asking for the job, right? You're not in a position of power. Is there a trick to be confident about how to do it or when to do it? Or you spoke about a time to do it here, but is there a way to phrase it that you can just copy paste and apply to your interviews?
Yeah, I think if you're transparent about it up front, being like, hey, look, like this is a two-way street. Obviously, you guys have vetted me out as somebody that you want to hire, but I've got my own questions about the org, so like that I feel comfortable. And I think if you phrase it as like the last thing either of us want, so maybe it's the candidate and also like the hiring manager, is for me to come and join your org and leave within a couple months. That doesn't help anybody. It's not profitable. The rep, there's gonna be a lot of training that goes on to get the rep up and running. So I've got questions about the role I'm stepping into, so that we're both aligned on what this looks like. And maybe a month or 2 or 3 months down the road, we're not looking at this going, oh, this, I'm looking at leaving because, I feel like I was overpromised, or the role wasn't what I thought it was. I think if candidates are transparent about that, it helps frame the conversation. And it's like, okay, like this isn't like an attack from the candidate to the potential employer. It's like, hey, I'm genuinely trying to understand what I'm getting myself into.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And something else that I was curious about as well. So my understanding is at the moment, in terms of the number of applicants that you get for a job, it's obviously great. It's considerably greater than it was before, right? Because of the amount of people made off versus the jobs that are available.
Yep.
How do you as a candidate separate yourselves from other people to be selected? And then if you put on your manager hat, what do you look for as someone recruiting someone into your team to be able to decide, all right, this person's the right candidate for us?
Yeah. There's going to be a little bit of a RepVue plug in here, just to be honest. I think doing research on the org that you're getting yourself into is huge. With RepVue, you can see quota attainment by various segments at an organization, enterprise versus mid-market, for example. But you can also apply to jobs on there. We've got hundreds of jobs from various sales orgs all over the world. That to me is like the basics, like just applying, because you're gonna, to your point, like you're gonna not really stand out if you're just sending in a resume. I think it's going out, and it's just like what you would do if you were out doing prospecting to your potential customers. It's finding who the hiring manager is. So if you're applying for an enterprise AE role, it's either going to be an RVP or an enterprise sales director or a manager or whatever. And then also going to their boss, which is likely going to be a VP of enterprise if it's on the East Coast in the United States here, or if it's in EMEA. You're going to find a VP of enterprise for EMEA, or VP of enterprise sales on the East Coast, et cetera. Figuring out their email. Well, what's their email format? Well, that's not that hard. It's either first name at company.com, first initial, last name at company.com, first.last at company.com, right? Like there's not that many variations there. And it's sending a personalized message and saying like, hey, here are the reasons I want to join your org. I love that you offer this, this, and this. I heard you on this podcast saying that you guys do this, this, and this. Like for example, with RepVue, we just had the VP of enterprise sales over at Motive on this guy, Adam Block. He's a great sales leader over at Motive. We talked about some very specific things on that podcast about what he's looking for with reps. That podcast episode is about to go live on Motive's profile on RepVue. We're also going to push it out to our users as well too. But it's like, if I was applying for a role over at Motive, I would go find whatever it is that Adam's talking about, either with us or any other podcast that he's been on, or maybe it's a LinkedIn post or whatever. I would reference that in the subject line. I would reference it in the email, and I would map back to how I can help him close deals. And like he talked about on the podcast with us, like very specific things that he's looking for with reps, like that is basic 101 in my opinion at this point, to message him with something that he referenced on there, and say, this is what I can help you bring to the table. You're looking for this type of rep. This is experience. This is examples of what I've done in the past that are what you're looking for.
Yeah, it's really, it sounds no different to prospecting really in a B2B environment. It's the exact same thing.
100% the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And on the flip side too, right? Like reps don't want to hear from recruiters and hiring managers with some generic pitch about how they just raised 50 million Series C, and they're a rocket ship that's growing like crazy. They want like good reps want to have messages that are tailored to them from recruiters as well too, because the good ones are getting hit up all the time.
So true. Yeah.
Even in this environment, even
Nick
in this
knows
market.
all about that. He gets about 50 approaches a day. So
yeah,
I can't keep up with it. That's too much.
It's too much. It's too much. You need an assistant to help you with it.
Darin, we spoke about OTs and we spoke about quota attainment, but from a CRO viewpoint, when you get given those numbers and you're looking at them and you're like, oh, this is not attainable.
Yeah.
How do you manage expectations with the board? How do you have those difficult conversations?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that happens so much. It's like a company will go out and raise money, which is based on backing into a revenue number that they're either likely going to grow into, right? So then that, if you're a CRO, that's all going to trickle down. So there's going to be a buffer from the CRO to the VP so that the CRO can hit their number. The VP is going to buffer down to the directors so that the VP can hit their number, the director to the AEs, et cetera, right? And I think it's just about being realistic. Like I think too many orgs do this top down forecast without really going bottoms up and like, what does our pipeline look like? Like there's orgs that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars and it's like, oh, well, our ICP, ideal customer profile, is anybody that uses Salesforce because we're a Salesforce plugin. And it's like, well, is that really your ICP? Like, I know you just raised $200 million based on that narrative, but like when it comes down to brass tacks, there's these companies that won't use this for X reason, and these companies won't use it for Y reason. And like, I don't think that much analysis is being done, one, from the VC side, and also two, from the company side, like to be really, to be realistic about who they can actually sell to. So I think it's got to happen prior to the numbers coming out. Like it's got to be done in actual due diligence of fundraising being raised, and like, what is our actual TAM versus like what can we actually close versus like the total universe of deals that are out there. And I don't think that happens enough. And I think the good news about the market today is I think that scrutiny is starting to happen. And I think that's it's really healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. It should hopefully trickle down to everything being a lot more realistic, and by default, hopefully meaning reps have more attainable targets as well, and gives them the ability to succeed. And it's interesting what you said about the ICP and what your TAM is. What kind of process would, as a sales leader, do you put in place to identify what your ICP is, and how reactive are you willing to be to change that in the event that, you're trying something, you're like, actually, we've got it wrong over here?
Are you talking like, yeah, it's a good question. Are you talking like from the startup perspective or like maybe a more established company?
I'd say for our listeners, it probably covers both. So whichever one you want to talk about.
Yeah. I think ICP is a little more dialed in at like a Salesforce or like a Workday, right? Versus like a company where this happens a lot. And I've seen this on the startup side and I've been a part of it. Yeah. This happens a lot with startups. So the CEO will hopefully, a good CEO is usually their first salesperson. If it's not, that to me is a red flag. But it's usually the first salesperson, and they'll go close deals with like 10 companies and people that they've worked with in the past or that they know really, really well, like part of their network, right? And then they go, oh, well, I can close these types of companies. Like I'm going to go hire a VP and 2 or 3 reps to go out and replicate this. And the reality is like, it's a lot harder to sell for a company if you're an individual contributor than you are even a VP, let alone the founder and CEO, right? So I think that's where there's a little bit of delusions of grandeur there, where a startup CEO goes out and raises a round of funding and is the only person that can actually sell their product. And then they run into this trap of like, oh, well, the VP sucks, so I'm going to get rid of them. I'll go back to being the VP of sales again. And managing these couple reps, or I'm going to fire the reps because the reps weren't successful either. And it becomes this revolving door of sales leaders that comes in, the founders, banging their head against the wall, trying to figure out why no one else can sell as well as they can. They still close deals, but not at the rate that when it was just the founder selling initially. So I think that's a pattern I've seen a lot. And I think the founders need to be really honest about who their ICP actually is. Like, have they gotten inbound leads from people that they don't know? Have they done outbounding to companies and closed deals that weren't a warm introduction, weren't somebody that was in their network? And I think that's where you can start really defining ICP, is because if you're just selling to people that you know in that initial network that you've got, like that's not really market indicators to me that you've got product market fit. Like, you've got to have inbounds from people that you've never met before that saw something and said, hey, I want to check this out. Like, that to me is where you're starting to click.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that, actually, because Mick and I spoke about the importance for joint flows from our perspective of out of network deals.
Yep.
Closing those versus the ones that are coming within our network as well. So yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, and that's why I joined RepVue. Like, when I first met with Ryan, our founder and CEO, like Ryan's former CRO of a public company called Channel Advisor, was there as an AE, was there for 15 years, was CRO when they went public. Like, it's an amazing story.
Yeah.
But when we started talking, I was like, all right, what prospective customers are you talking to? And he pulled open Salesforce. He showed me the ops that he's working on. I was like, where did these come from? And then he showed me the lead form of them coming inbound. And I was like it was like CHROs and VPs of talent of some really big companies. And I was like, did you know any of these people? He was like, no. I was like, that's interesting. Like, that's something I want to get on board with, because if you've got people you've never talked to before coming inbound, like, there's something here. So that was, 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago before I joined.
Yeah, a good solid demand gen function is always a plus, not necessarily.
But it wasn't even like demand gen. It was just like him posting on LinkedIn, and like people would come inbound.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Well,
That's been our demand gen. It's wild.
We're trying not to plug products here too much, but your product is pretty amazing, Darin. So I'm not surprised you're having a lot of organic momentum.
Appreciate that. Yeah, it's salespeople love RepVue because they can avoid traps and avoid landmines and get positions that they wouldn't think they were a fit for, and they can just really make better career choices. That's our end goal, is to help users make better career choices.
Yeah, go sign up, guys. It's very valuable. I think access to all this data, like what is the trend you're the most surprised by at the moment?
From RepVue data?
Or RepVue data?
What's the trend I'm most surprised by from RepVue data?
Yeah.
So Ryan, our CEO, just posted about this today, and shout out to Adam Little, who runs our data team, for finding this nugget. But so Ryan's post today on LinkedIn was about how deal sizes, like we all know that large deal sizes tend to take long, right? Like 100K, 200K plus is typically a traditional enterprise cycle that takes, probably 6 months plus it's like getting an act of Congress done. But what we're finding is that deal cycles are taking longer, even under 50, 25, 15K, because companies are just scrutinizing, and CFOs are scrutinizing every deal that they're trying to get done, or that their teams are potentially spending money on.
Yeah. So even the smaller deals are actual enterprise deals nowadays.
Yeah, like if a 15K deal's got to go get approval from a CFO, like that's a world that 2 years ago it was like, oh, like there's teams and especially at big companies, they'll have buying authority up to X amount of dollars without getting anybody else above them looking at it. Now it's like almost anything that's going out the door is getting looked at by a CFO.
Yeah, we see the same thing. Our solution helps orchestrate all these moving parts, but everything are getting elongated. Everything is just a more difficult sales process or buying process. And
but it begs the question of, like, should it have been like that to begin with?
Would
we have been in this mess if it wasn't like that?
Yeah.
It's true.
I don't know. I just feel like money was so cheap for so long, and there was so much VC money that was just getting thrown into some of these companies where they like thought they had product market fit, but they didn't. And they'd go out and hire an army of salespeople, and like a percentage of them would get maybe 50, 60% of quota, and they'd call that a win because they're growing top line. Like the whole metric was like, just grow top line revenue. It doesn't matter what it costs.
Yeah, growth at all costs. And we're seeing a big shift now where it's more sustainable growth is what's actually paramount for both investors as well as obviously businesses themselves.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there again. It's something you mentioned within the data, and isn't a surprise, is that customer or even deal cycles are getting longer and longer. Even the smaller deals are as well. What kind of advice would you give, or what have you seen work well to help navigate that as well?
Yeah, well, in the old world, pre 2023, right? Yeah, I think it was very easy to sell a deal to one person. I think you could be single threaded and get a deal done. Now, I don't think it's possible. I think now you've got to have, and I don't think there's there's some tools where it's like you've got one buyer that's potentially going to buy it and that's it. But everybody's selling to the CFO now, whether you're selling a MarTech tool or a recruiting tool or whatever. And I think you've got to, it comes back again, it comes back to discovery. And I posted about this the other day, is like, people think they have champions, but they don't. Like, people think that somebody that comes inbound and is interested is a champion. They're not necessarily a champion. Like, you've got to champion test the heck out of the people that you're working with, and that you're trying to sell to. And this is also a force management thing of like the definition of a champion. Their four definitions are, what's in it for them personally? Do they have access to the economic buyer? The economic buyer being the person that's going to actually put their signature on the DocuSign. What's in it for them personally? And are they selling when you're not there? Did I repeat personally twice? I think I did. What's in it for them personally? Access to the economic buyer, power and influence in the org. And then selling when you're not there. That's the four.
Yeah.
And if you don't have, if you're trying to sell to doesn't have all four of those, you don't have a champion. Like, you've got to make sure that like you don't have happy ears doing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then for me personally, it's about lining that up with the multi-threading as well. So we talk about sending to the CFO, try to map that out as soon as possible. Make sure it's on the right from the beginning. I heard an interesting tip actually from someone else who heard it from someone else, which was what they actually done with their champion, was inform them more than anything else that they will be keeping the CFO in loop by email as well throughout the whole process. So when they get to that point now of, all right, it's decision time, it's goal time to get the CFO involved, this is already on his radar as well, which I thought was really smart.
Yeah, and a test there of whether or not you've got a champion is like your champion says, oh, well, I'll loop in our CFO. I'm working on a couple other things that I'm looking to buy as well too, and I'm already in contact with Jane or Joe, our CFO.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, if they're willing to loop him in, like that's a big move right there. Like, love when stuff like that happens.
Absolutely. Doesn't happen enough, but yeah, love it.
Agreed.
Look, Darin, it's been great having you on this podcast. We usually only have 30 minutes, so we are just about out of time, but we do have a bit of a tradition on the podcast for the final, which is throughout your whole career to date, what is your favorite memory and why?
Man, I've had a lot of fun selling. Been to some cool places, had some great experiences. I think my favorite experience in memory is a deal that I was working on in G2. I had gotten dinner set up with the CMO of a company that we were selling to. It was Sprinkler, and Grad Khan was their CMO at the time. And if you look him up on Twitter, he's a big Back to the Future fan. His Twitter header photo is him sitting in a DeLorean. He owns the DeLorean, and his headline is Marketing to the Future. And when I was at G2, we sold intent data so we could understand what buyers were doing and what future products they were going to buy. So I went on Amazon. It cost me like $20. I got the little sports almanac book that was in the movie Back to the Future, if you guys remember that.
Yeah.
And it was like a fake, sports almanac. I brought that. And I printed out the buyer intent data from Sprinkler, and I said, Grad, this is marketing to the future. This is what your buyers are doing. They're looking at you versus Sprout Social and Hootsuite. And I can tell you when your current customers are shopping for your competitors, and I can tell you when your prospective customers are shopping for you guys versus other competitors as well. He's like, he loved it. And I ended up closing the biggest deal of my career.
Amazing.
It was a lot of fun. It was over a 30-minute, a couple hour dinner, right? And within 2 weeks, I had the biggest deal done in my career. That's
amazing. And that's a good example of what reps can actually do right now to help support their deals with prospecting as well, standing out and being different. So great little story there.
Exactly. That to me was better than the Cuban stuff. It was
yeah. Amazing. Well, Darin, look, thank you very much for joining us today. This has been the Revenue Revolution podcast sponsored by Joint Flows. Until next time.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.